Welcome everybody to the hearing panels today. I've got to my left and right of me Councillor Stallard and Councillor Benge. Order of businesses as we have in the agenda. There's no apologies. If there's any interests or conflicts of interest, I'll get you to raise those at the right time or now. What I'll do is we move into public forum, and we do have two people here request to speak at the public forum. I've got Jackie McNay and Darren, if I've written right here, Canton. Oh, welcome to the table. Sorry, it feels like we're a bit of an inquisition like that, but I'm sure you've worked with that before. And I've got here your Stagan Smith on behalf of Stoke Valley. So Jackie, you're working with Stagan Smith on behalf of Stoke Valley Holdings. And just please, what's Stoke Valley Holdings?
So Stoke Valley Holdings, that's a company owned by Stuart Calder, and Stuart owns the Montebello subdivision, which is up off Ngawhatu Road. It's the ex-Ngawhatu Hospital site. Yep.
This is what we've got in our agenda.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're both.
And we're both here. So some of you be familiar with me. I'm a planner with Stagan Smith, and Darren is the development engineer that has been seeing through the portion of Montebello subdivision, the latest subdivision, which is the Chapel subdivision, and hence the road names that have been put forward.
Very good. Yeah. No, thank you. So go ahead. You got 10 minutes, but saying I'm not going to be strict to that.
Well, first of all, apologies from Stuart. He did definitely want to be here, but unfortunately he's called away to South Africa to be with his elderly mother and deal with some health issues there. So he's not able to be here today. He has, though, put in a statement that's on the back of the agenda, which you'll have had a chance to read, which he's set out fairly clearly his views on the naming, but just a little bit of background. As I said at the start, this is a subdivision which is known as the Chapel subdivision because it is the site of the chapel for the ex-Ngawhatu Hospital. It's not an old chapel. It was a 1970s chapel. It was non-denominational, so it wasn't associated with any particular church. And when Stuart bought the property back in the early 2000s, that building was still there. Progressively, the buildings were removed and the subdivision has moved up the valley. So when it came to road naming, that is the significance of the site. It is the site of the chapel, so he put forward 3 names, Chapel Way, Chapel Place and Old Chapel Way, I think. And that was put forward on the 7th of November last year. So that was 6 months ago. Subdivision's now finished. We're at completion certificate. So this issue has obviously gone on. So the intention from council, it was lodged on the 7th of November. Council came back on the 19th of December. Council staff saying, thanks for that, we'll get it to the hearing panel. Early in the new year, when staff started working through issues that were supposed to come to your February hearing on the 12th of February, it didn't because staff were concerned that that there was a direction to take into account the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care and look at any potential ramifications from naming, and since that time, there's been correspondence between the parties raising this. The response has been that it's not associated with any particular church. It's non-denominational. It's certainly not the clients have been very deliberate in their naming on the site. That is why it is Montebello Avenue and does not carry on the name Ngāwhatu Road, because no doubt there will be people in the wider community maybe have negative associations with that. Similarly, Orphanage Creek, very definitely negative associations with the orphanage that was on this property, which is some distance from here. And so Stuart has definitely not wished to name anything after the orphanage or after Ngāwhatu. The chapel, as he said in his statement, is considered, you know, an area of reflection, peace, harmony, and that's why he wants to name it that. And it leads into the cemetery on site. So I think the association of the chapel, and at the end of this road is a right of way up to the cemetery. So it's all quite linked and quite appropriate. When the issues regarding the concerns of potential concerns of association of chapel and abuse and care were asked for 3 other names. There have been discussions between Stuart and council staff. As he said in his statement, if made to put forward other things, then he would just put bland, facetious comments in, because felt that lots of names could, if you wish to have some sort of connotation on it. And so, and out of that came the issue of red lane and blue lane, and here we are today, and that's what his statement, and I won't, it's in his words, and that's how he feels, and so that's the background, and here we are.
Thank you. Just bear with me here. Because we do a lot of, over my 4 terms, I've done a lot of naming of roads, and this is sort of a new one in regards to the technical advice we're given on that. So to get it completely straight, which you described it well, is the name Chapel Way or Chapel Place or Old Chapel Way, as in the staff report, they felt that would trigger it not being that name and would need an alternative name. And you mentioned and obviously when staff present, I'll be asking, get a better understanding of their methodology or reasoning. But from your perspective, or what you've been informed, the Royal Commission inquiry in regard to abuse and care, that was in response to Ngāwhatu or Ngāwhatu, as I call it, Ngāwhatu in general, or was it in regards to the church, Catholic church, or that building, the chapel, or something?
No, I don't believe anyone's brought to our attention any specific parts of the inquiry into abuse and care. I'm simply making the statement that some in the community, this was a national hospital, a national psychiatric facility. I'm simply saying I'm sure that maybe there are people that did not have a good experience. Well, it wouldn't have been a good experience in a psychiatric hospital. So
Montebello development, or Montebello Ave, is the broader area of development, and the road, and I'll refer back to the map shortly. I want to having questions, discussion with staff, but that particular road, Chapel Way, as described, that's in reflection of the church there, and you're saying it's a non-denominational. And are you thinking because of the denomination that there was a concern raised, or just because of Ngāwhatu?
I don't know. The staff have raised that. I guess they haven't. My understanding, it's not been any statement that there is a specific complaint, but simply that the nature of the full activity on the site, the hospital itself.
In a broader sense.
Yeah. And I guess we would just say in every town, as indeed Nelson, we do have Church Road, we do have Church Lane. We all talk about the church steps on a daily basis. So I guess our client sees chapel in that generic term.
And just to grind down the detail here, chapel specifically was because the road corresponds to where the church used to be.
Yes, that's right. There was a chapel on the site that we're developing. So there's 20 lots.
Yep.
And the chapel was occupied that site.
And the
Yeah.
chapel was part of the boys' home.
No. So the orphanage.
Before, it was prior or separate or part of the community.
The orphanage was burnt down.
The orphanage was first built in the 1880s, 1890s. It was
around in the 1980s.
Not 1880s, and it was a Marist brothers orphanage for boys. This, what I've read of the history of Nelson, was, as probably most orphanages weren't in those days, but it were not nice things associated with that orphanage. The orphanage was about 300 metres, 300 or 400 metres, and Stuart absolutely would not name anything under that. And this church was in 1970, so so there was no association between the two. Right.
Yeah. Okay. I've asked quite a few questions. I'll come to my two colleagues here to give them a chance. Is anything you guys?
What happened to the chapel, the building? Was it demolished or taken away?
It was, my understanding, it was demolished. It was a brick building, so there was materials within the building salvaged, as I understand, of some of the wood inside the building, but it was a plain. I do remember it being there. It wasn't a building of great architectural merit, as I remember. It was just a plain brick, modest structure, 1970 structure.
All the other buildings, I can't remember that one. Do you know if it was deconsecrated?
I couldn't tell you that. I'm not sure what the situation is when it wasn't a denomination, whether that deconsecration has to happen. Not my expertise, sorry.
That's all from me.
Thanks for being here today. Just a few questions. You mentioned that 3 names were provided, but if I heard you correctly, they were all chapel. Was that the case? So is that 3 names or 1 name? Because we do commonly ask for 3 names with alternatives because, issues arise or it's not sure. It might merge that one of the names might not meet certain criteria. And I do ask that because in our report, it's stated that Stoke Valley Holdings Limited wished to acknowledge the history and previous land use or the local vegetation in its choice of name. And yet in the letter from the developer, it's clearly stated the only choice is Chapel Lane. So I wonder if the way of thinking by the developer has changed over time from that broader intention around previous land use or vegetation to, no, we're no longer thinking that way. Chapel Lane's the only lane and the only name we'd like to see.
I guess just to clarify that the letter that came in from Stoke Valley Holdings, or the statement, was written before this report was updated. So the report is written reflecting the 2 other names that were suggested. If that makes sense. So it's the timing of or the order that these have been written is why there's a difference there. Why it's not why the 2 don't dovetail.
I guess the question for me, it does state in the report that at some stage Stoke Valley Holdings was open to a name that was related to the history and previous land use or the local vegetation. And yet now it seems from the letter, the developer is only seeking one name only. So do you have any sort of update on that? Like whether there is still flexibility or we're only really looking for one name?
So Stoke Valley's Holdings' strong preference is that Chapel is in the naming of that street, whether it's Chapel Way, Chapel Lane, Old Chapel Lane, Old Chapel Way.
Is there still, to your knowledge, and I know that you're not the developer, and consideration might be given to a name related to vegetation?
Yes, can't answer that.
Okay, thanks. And just finally, there's been some talk about the chapel. It's non-denominational. I think the inquiry about abuse and care is quite clear that we're sensitive to memorializing or the institution overall, rather than a specific building necessarily, or clearing some buildings saying they're fine and some are not fine. I mean, do you see that perspective that whether it is a boarding house or a dining hall or a chapel, like they're all part of the institution, and that's the key phrasing in the inquiry? So can you see that that still might be the chapel, although you might talk about specifics of the chapel, it is still part of the institution that might cause distress to people if they had bad experiences in the institution overall?
Well, I think if you read, we can't speak, substitute our views for the long-standing owner, but he's covered that in his statement that he's put forward, that that chapel, in his opinion, is a generic term for a building, and a building associated with reflection. I think the other terms there with sort of sanctuary, reflection. That's why he is putting it forward.
Thank you.
Sorry, well, the words he used was refuge and tranquility. Yeah, that he's putting, because that's what a chapel was associated with in his mind. And I guess also noting the cemetery at the end of this will be the access into the cemetery. So you'll come into Chapel Way, won't you? And then you'll proceed on to the right of way up to the cemetery. And different members in the community do look after that cemetery in the wider Nelson community, I understand.
Just bear with me a moment, I'm just reading it. Just going to bearing where on that, the map. No, thank you for that. It's explained very well, and understand where your client is at on that. And just a bit of context of a greater subdivision. Obviously, we're just dealing with that road. Have there been other roads part of that subdivision that have progressed through with naming, or was this I'm just looking at the map we've got here of the subdivision?
But the other ones have largely been features on the site. One was green.
My main reason question is that has there been any issues?
No, so one was associated with the village green. There was always a village green, I understand, with the hospital, and that's why the street behind that's called Greenfield Way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess that comes back to, if you say there's, back to the point of Councillor Stallard, that was a feature, it was the village green, and it's still referred to that as a village green, and Greenfield behind it. The other names are Old Farm Road, and that's because Landcourt Farm surrounds Ngāwhatu, and that was literally the road to the Landcourt Farm. And Bridgewater Way, it's the bridge over Orphanage Creek. So the names and there's one other, I think, associated with a long associated caretaker on the land. But other than that, it's been generally related to, from the owner's point of view, matters that relate to the land.
Well, that's good insight, because Chapel Lane or so forth, like those other names, are really a reflection on the lay of the land and the features there historically of how people identified their way through that bit of land. with or without buildings there. So each of those names, from my perspective, don't relate directly to the institution or so forth. Thank you. I'm just going to comment from a question. That's the bench.
By far, most of the names up there are, I assume, surnames. Charters, Wansford, Rhodes. Most of them appear to me to be people's names.
Just check that's part of the subdivision.
That's not Montebello.
Isn't it?
Not sure.
We're not far off from Montebello going to the left. So I'm just looking at the map there. So you go an avenue there, then you go to Montebello.
So the two main roads in Ngāwhatu are Montebello Avenue, because that's the name of the whole development, and then Sunningdale is the valley off to the right after you enter. There's Bridgewater Lane. Waterson Lane was. Waterson Lane is the only one that I understand is a person. Then there's Green.
So the road that goes up past the women's hospital is not part of your development.
Up to the women's hospital.
Or Sunningdale Drive. Is that part of your development?
Yes, Sunningdale Drive is, yes.
So there is Mansfield, the names I read out before. Charters. There seem to be people's names.
I think,
Wansford.
I think
Road.
possibly they are Solitaire. You're looking at street names from Solitaire Investments. So they.
Sunningdale's not your development.
Part of Sunningdale is, yes. So I'm trying to think, if you were driving up Sunningdale Drive, the Montebello development is generally on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Solitaire's generally on the left-hand side.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't understand that. I thought Solitaire was the other side of the hill in Marsden.
Oh no, so Solitaire is the old Landcourt farm, and it completely surrounded from Marsden Valley and came around both of the valleys in Ngāwhatu, because Ngāwhatu splits into two valleys, and the old Landcourt farm came around on the hills. Yeah, right from Marsden right through to Ngāwhatu. Yeah.
I understand where the Landcourt farm was.
Yeah.
I just thought that Calder was developing up Ngāwhatu and Solitaire were doing the development around Quail Rise and on the other side. I didn't realise they had you both had a.
Yeah, so Solitaire, if you like, has got a Marsden Valley subdivision and a Ngāwhatu subdivision.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And just quickly, preference. The first preference is Chapel Way, or as I said, Chapel Place or Old Chapel Way. In Arenaport, Chapel Lane. That's not coming from developer.
Oh, quite happy with Chapel Lane, I'm sure.
Just reading it.
Chapel, I think, is the key thing for the client. Is
okay. Just Officer Scott down here in the report here, just in the real and only choice is Chapel Lane. That's because the chapel stood on the site next to this new lane. This part of the site has always been referred to as a chapel site, and that's okay. That's from Stuart. Okay, no, that's cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, nothing else there. I think nothing from you guys. Cool.
Thanks.
That is the end of public forum. Next on the item is, and we'll be coming up to this item. Shouldn't be too far away. But first up, just confirmation of the minutes. I wasn't at the previous hearing. If someone here was at the previous hearing and wants to move.
I was at one of them.
Yeah.
But I guess we just.
Yep, nothing. I was at the other. I've got to go through the. Sorry, use the paper a lot. But if you want to move, and
Or do you want to move the first one because you were there? And
Yep. I'll move them in two parts, 2 lots of minutes. I'll move the first.
Happy to second?
Put it. Those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
The second,
I'm happy to move the second.
I'll second it.
seconded by Councillor Benge. Put it. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. So I'll bring a staff. Our reports, so we've got staff here for reports. Thank you for that. I've got it here. Let's make this correct. I've got it on page 11. Just looking through the. So it's not in digital, but yep, very good. So we've got the first report here in regards to, this is a report naming of chapel site, Montebello Ave, which we had kindly had 2 submitters presenting for. So I'll let you take it as read, but feel free to please, especially this topic. This topic is going to have a few more questions. And like I said before, done many namings. Sometimes they're a little bit twisty, but this is a new scenario for me. But I'll get you guys, if you could please describe. I've read it through, but just describe why your recommendation is what it is in the report, a bit of background to it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the name Chapel Lane has the potential for causing an issue with the abuse as a result of the review of the abuse and care report.
Sorry, Mr. Lusworth.
Yeah, of the report.
Yep.
The potential for a link with either a perpetrator or a site, and it could, if Chapel site was identified as a place of abuse, there would be the requirement to rename the road further down track, and that's the issue really.
The risk.
That's the risk. And for people that live on a street that already have a name, undoing that name is more problematic. And that's why the recommendation that the name be declined has been requested.
Thank you. Thank you. That's just apologise if we take a bit of time here. I'm just getting the. I'm very familiar with Ngāutu and Braemar, and it's gone through some iterations in that area. And I recall 1980s, it was closed down as being Braemar. Got that right. But going back further, as explained, it was a orphanage. This report we talk about or refer to Whanataki, got that right? Whanakaitia through pain and trauma. The report, I'm just, sorry, the report, there's been a specific report on this institution, or are you talking about the report in general in regards to the Royal Commission Inquiry of Abuse?
The national report, yes.
There's a nationwide report in general. So there hasn't been a report on this particular institution or place saying we have some nervousness about development or naming there, but you're talking about the report in general, nationwide, sort of covering potential of places that may have a history that's not a positive.
And Ngāwhatu Hospital has been identified as an institution where there has been abuse identified. And
Ngāwhatu and Braemar have been identified in that report.
I'm not sure about Braemar, but certainly Ngāwhatu.
So Ngāwhatu has been identified in the report, among other, specifically.
Yeah, and okay. The work to drill down and establish whether there is a link with the chapel site is work that has not been done. We are waiting for direction from central government about how that process will occur, because it's an enormous report with a lot of redacted information.
Okay.
So,
and we aren't sort of privy, well, we could be privy, we're not privy to the report in this hearing ourselves. I'm not sort of broad report. we don't have an attachment.
Oh, it'd be a very large attachment. So it is available to read online. Yep, you can read it.
And this Royal Commission inquiry, or this particular national report, when was that instigated? This is in recent
well, it
times.
was released in July of 24, so last year.
Oh, very recent. So,
yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
It probably hasn't had a chance really toing and throwing on it. And others, has there been instances of other subdivisions in Nelson who've come under this, or outside of the Nelson region, or?
Not for us.
And,
not in the Nelson region.
Sorry if I'm asking a lot of questions, but once again, this is obviously very recent. Has there been, I'll say historically recently, since reports released, of situations where they've had to take it on board or regretted a name that's had to be retracted down the track? We're sort of hitting new ground on this.
Yeah, staff aren't aware of situations like this where a naming panel has chosen a name and have to reverse it. I think if you look at in the report, section 3.2, it has the recommendation of that report where, and I think this is the only direction that we've got to date, which is, that local authorities should review the appropriateness. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
And consider things. It doesn't direct us any further than that.
I'll ask my two colleagues. I've spoken about there. Please feel free if you can jump in. Any queries, questions of clarification or officers or understanding?
Okay, now thank you. Do we know much about the process by which name changes will be reviewed, or names will be reviewed in the future? Will that be an act of Parliament, or will it go? We don't know how that process will run out.
No, unfortunately, no, we don't. This is a recommendation from the report. Just actually what will come of that recommendation is not clear yet.
Okay. And 3.3 states complaints about abuse and neglect have been made. Are they in the context of that inquiry, or are they outside of are they documented in that report? Does it say complaints of abuse and neglect have been made in relation to former patients at Ngāwhatu Hospital? Yes. Okay, thank you. And the chapel, that was part of the actual institute overall. It wasn't separate to it, just on a nearby site. It was the chapel for the psychiatric hospital. Is that the case?
Part of the psychiatric hospital site.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just clarify that, because we've got the chapel was 1970s, Ngāwhatu was 1880s.
No, that was orphanage, and later it became the hospital.
Ngāwhatu started in 1922 through to 2000.
Okay, so that's in regards to, so it's less about the orphanage, it's about
Ngāwhatu, about the Ngāwhatu Hospital,
Braemar,
yes,
which came after that.
Yeah, and the site of the
sorry, carry on.
The site of the chapel was on lots 18, 19 and 20 of this development. If you look at the plan attached.
Thank you. Any other queries? Councillor Benj.
Thank you. Is there records of abuse at the chapel?
The work to do the review hasn't happened, and we're waiting for central government to give the direction about how that's going to take place. So no, there has been no deep dive into that level of detail yet.
When did the orphanage stop being an orphanage?
Through to 1919.
It stopped being an orphanage in 1919.
Yes. And
so I'm a bit confused here. You're talking about Ngāwhatu Hospital, but that's separate to the orphanage. The orphanage was a Catholic orphanage that started in the 1800s and went through to 1919. So that building's been sitting empty since then.
The Ngāwhatu Hospital replaced the orphanage, and the chapel was established as part of the psychiatric hospital in the 70s.
But I mean, the graveyard there is from the orphanage, isn't it? It's horrific. But it's what went on at that orphanage. But that stopped in 1919, which is 50 years or more before they built the chapel.
Yes, that's what I was.
But all your other comments are about the hospital, which is a different thing altogether. But you say the hospital closed in 2000. I mean, that was demolished in the 1980s.
Right.
Rata, Kōwhai, the villas were still in use up to the 2000s, and then the deinstitutionalisation took place, so many of those people were relocated to the community, and the acute unit moved to the main hospital site at that time.
Okay, but I actually was part of demolishing the building up there in the 1980s, so I don't know what building that was.
Maybe it was another wing.
It was the women's hospital.
Right.
I didn't realise that some of it was still operating. Okay. So you're saying that there's this study underway, and once they get through it, they might want to remove all names that may trigger somebody. I mean, presumably anybody that was at the orphanages that didn't die at the hands of the orphanages is now dead anyway, because they'd have to be 106 if they were still alive. So the abuse at the orphanage is not going to trigger anybody. So are you expecting Ngāwhatu Orphanage, Poor Man's Stream, are you expecting challenges to those names? If you expect a challenge to this name, I mean, if something's going to be triggering, I mean, the hospital is known as Ngāwhatu, and the comments about Ngāwhatu were a derogatory comment, just as Cherry Farm and some of these others, they were often used as derogatory comments, or certainly when I was a kid, you know, you watch yourself, you end up at Cherry Farm. So there's no question they were derogatory comments. So are you expecting challenges to those sort of names?
It depends what comes out of this. I mean, all we've got to go on is that recommendation from the report that local authorities review names that were associated with those institutions.
Because, I mean, right now, the government's looking at compensating people who were electrocuted to make them behave. And we have the alternate names, red and blue, which is positive and negative. I mean, I was abused as a kid. I would be more triggered by positive and negative than anything else. If you're expecting challenges to Ngāwhatu and orphanage and those things, you know, if you draw a line long enough, you're going to pick up everything. Absolutely everything. So just how how do you feel? I haven't read the report from the government. Maybe I should have, but I haven't. I've read everything that you have done, but you obviously went through that report to get the bits of it that you have. So what's your feeling about the challenges that we're going to face in the future to names like church and chapel and Ngāwatū and orphanage? Do you think that realistically they're going to be challenged?
I think that the direct names will be something that councils will be asked to reconsider. I don't know whether we'll be asked or directed. You know, that's it. I don't know what the strength will be from central government as a result of this report and recommendation. There has already been formal apologies and looks to redress. I mean, that was just some recommendations. There were heaps. So some of those recommendations have been acted on already. It's likely going to take time before they go through all of them, and then it's unclear whether it's going to be how directive it will be based on that recommendation. But I would expect that the very direct names will be needing to be reconsidered.
But the horrific things that went on in the orphanage have no direct line to this chapel.
Correct. This chapel was built in the 1970s. Yeah. It's only linked to the Ngāwatū Hospital, psychiatric hospital.
Everything that happened at the hospital wasn't bad. I mean, I still look after a woman who spent her life looking after the elderly and the people at Braemar. And
agreed. I mean,
and she once a year or so used to spend 3 weeks there because she needed it, and she came back better. And I still, on her mother's dying bed, she asked me to make sure I looked after her for the rest of her life, and I will. And so it was a sanctuary for her. Mm. And when I lived in Rye Valley, there was a man there, Billy Bryant, who had the intelligence of about a 7-year-old, and his parents used to get, I guess it was really respite, but he worked as a tailor out in the mill, and I mean that's one of the toughest jobs a man can ever be asked to do. But every now and then he went there for 3 weeks, and I used to talk to him most days. He was happy going there. He's happy coming home. So it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, there's some. The problem is bullies are attracted to places like this. Bullies are bullies, whichever organisation they're in, and it can be horrific. But the hospital was also a place of care. It wasn't just a place of damages.
Yeah, we acknowledge that, absolutely.
So I guess that's it from me. I personally see another side to some of these things, but that's nothing to do with this, in that, you know, lest we forget, we have Anzac every year. I mean, that was pretty horrific. But it's there to make sure we don't forget. And it's a bit like the history of New Zealand that's been written by the British. If you get to write the history, you get to decide what's in it. And, you know, history shows we don't learn by history, and I'm not sure that burying things is the answer. Hiding everything that went wrong is the answer. But I don't see any direct link between whatever was done to those poor kids between 4 and 8. They all got the same death, drowning. Just awful. I don't see a link between the orphanage.
No, there isn't a link.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank raising anything that may be a risk. A lot of colleagues here, I read through it, we'll read through it again. I think it was very helpful. Some of this presentation themselves. I don't go on the debate yet, my colleagues may agree or disagree, and that's welcome to. I don't see risk. I think it's an overreach. My mother was born, I was born here, my mother was born in Nelson, my grandmother was born in Nelson, my great grandmother was born in Nelson, and my great great grandmother was born in Nelson. And there's a lot of history, good, bad, and pretty good times, pretty tough times. My concern about, so I'll repeat, I wasn't on the microphone here. I say my mother was born here, my grandmother was born here, my great grandmother was born here, including myself, and my children are born here. There's a huge history in Nelson. I see a great concern of this taking too much into this sort of report or concerns, and it has its place. But if I was going to have a risk, I'd have concerns with Quarantine Road, Nayland Road, Nelson College, Trafalgar Street, all sorts of things which have a far connotation, good, bad, and different, all part of bringing in Nelson, and there's some, I feel, for some incredibly good things, truly bad things that happened in the past, but I think we're being far too risk averse on this, and Ngāwatu playground, Ngāwatu football field, Ngāwatu area, you know, and I don't even struggle, I can't see a link between Chapel and my view, and my colleagues are welcome to have a different perspective, but Chapel, I think, is an incredibly good name for the area, and I think will be embraced by all. I can see the reasoning for this Worley Commission inquiry of abuse and care, and but seriously, if we're going to be concerned about Chapel, if there is a Chapel Way, we're buggered. Like I said, Quarantine Road, Nayland Road, Boys College, Trafalgar Street. I could name every single one. People had some hardship. And there were tough times back then, and there were some terrible things happened, and there's terrible things happening now tomorrow. But I think this is probably giving you a bit of feedback. I'm only doing this so if there's something I've completely missed, an actual situation or the Chapel's involved in, and I haven't been respectful of. But a chapel has a greater sense of a place of reflection, care, and grounding of the city. But I think I've done a fair bit of my debate, but it's really for a chance for my colleagues to know where I'm at and can counter if they think differently. But thank you for your report, and thank you for raising it. I know there's a lot of things that need to be considered. I appreciate that. I'll move into discussion. In fact, what I'll do is rather than doing it all at the end, I'll do any debate or consideration for this particular item here and now before we move on to the next one, which is the Quail Rise. After some feedback from my two colleagues here on this topic, I've made it clear where I stand on this.
I'm happy to move.
Thank you. To move that we enable Chapel.
No. I support the recommendation by officers. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'm putting in an amendment, but I'll give an opportunity for Councillor Ben's. My amendment is that we enable the name that has been brought by the submitters.
I mean, as chair, would you like to call for a seconder?
For my amendment?
Yeah. Well, for the primary recommendation, I've moved it.
See if we've got a seconder.
There might or might not be a seconder.
No, so there's no seconder. just going to adjourn for a moment. So just saying, we've just been in the gym to get some advice here. We had a mover for the recommendation, the officer's recommendation to not enable the subdivider's preferred name. There was no seconder for that. The recommendation on the table was, as in the report, as an option. There was an option 1 to approve the name Chapel Lane. If the officers are ready, just bear with me, just so we got very clear on the front of our screen, so my 2 colleagues can see exactly what we've got in front of us. And officers, please let me know if you think there's some wording there it's going to cause issues in regards to the interpretation of what we got. Thank you. Hey, thank you for that. So we've got in front of us a recommendation approving the name Chapel Lane as from option 1 of the officer's report for the road within the subdivision development of Montebello Avenue. I would like to move recommendation in front of us. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Councillor Benj. As I said in questioning, I think I made pretty clear my view on this. Quite rightly, the staff have raised a potential risk, but on understanding from the developer and understanding the history and from the questioning we had there for this topic, I feel Chapel Lane is very appropriate and is, and I agree with Councillor Benj's commentary there. There's a lot of history in Nelson. If you draw a long enough string, as I was saying before, you could find the likes of Quarantine Road, Nayland Road, Boys College, Trafalgar Street. There'd be something which someone may have concern, but I have a lot of comfort in the word Chapel Lane. In the area, it echoes the names of many of the other streets which have come through. There's been a reflection on the features of the area, and as at the time and at presently, people use to navigate themselves around the area. And I think it's great to reflect on the landscape there. So Chapel Lane, I think, is a very apt name, and I don't believe there'd be any risk on that, a far lesser risk than those previous places I just mentioned. And some of us have a very long history in Nelson, and it's very good to understand and appreciate and empathise and resolve history that isn't so good. But I can't see any issue. I think it'd be very much welcomed by the community. I think it was a very good choice and a very well thought out and empathetic choice by the subdivider. I'll move any other debate. Move my colleagues. Okay.
Thank you. I understand the report and what it's saying. I just don't find that this really falls into it. As Councillor Skinner said, Trafalgar, Halifax, Rutherford. I mean, Nelson wasn't a laugh a minute either. And the other side of it is, I don't think our negative history should be absolutely buried, because once it's buried, this is what everybody did. Don't look there. But I don't think this falls into that either. The orphanage does. And some of the practices in the mental hospital may well. And I guess we'll find out about those as time goes on. Personally, I think once you've driven up Ngāwatū Road beside Orphanage Stream, Chapel Lane's not going to trigger you.
Yes, Skinner. Yeah, and thank you. I'd like to echo those comments, thanking staff for their tact and sensitivity on this difficult issue. First reflection is that we see in the report that the intention of the developer was to choose a name that acknowledges the history, previous land use or local vegetation. And that, that flexibility is good in cases like this, and it's a shame that hasn't come through in the end with the naming and the refusal to provide alternative legitimate names. We do see in the following item on this agenda also a naming in which three legitimate names have been provided, and that would have been useful in this case, I suspect. I do think we have to make some effort to put ourselves in the shoes of those who might have suffered abuse at this institution in the past. I've no doubt that chapels and churches and cathedrals worldwide have been places of refuge and tranquility for many people for many years. We need to widen our scope and not acknowledge that they have been places of harm also. The country perhaps where we have the greatest understanding of that is in France, where they've also had inquiries specifically related to church leaders, where they document more than 216,000 children have been abused by church leaders in that country since 2050. So I think we're coming back now to Ngāwhatu. We need to acknowledge that, as well as that chapel being a refuge and place of tranquility. It may have been, and as we've heard from officers, we haven't dug down into specifics of those complaints of abuse. It may also have been a place of harm. And if that isn't the case in the future, we may well, as the officers have said, be coming back and changing the name and the directive of that Royal Commission of Inquiry. By choosing one name or another, we are not hiding or burying the past. We are talking about it today. It's been covered in detail in the inquiry, and more is to come. The key word here that is used by the inquiry is what is appropriate. We should talk about our history and our stories and our past, but is it appropriate to memorialise something that for at least some people in our community is a great source of harm, and for their family and perhaps their children who are also still living with that trauma? I don't believe memorialising it is appropriate in this case. I think we should stay focused and not just get distracted by widening the issue to other areas of the city. The concern here is specifically what's detailed in the Royal Commission's inquiry, and what's relevant to us is the site of the Ngāwhatu Psychiatric Hospital, and we do know that there have been complaints of abuse there. So we don't have it within our power, the naming of those other streets and so on. What we have within our power today is the naming of this particular road. And the Commission of Inquiry is relevant to us. It may become increasingly relevant in the future. Now, the recommendation that we should avoid memorialising institutes where abuse took place, we can choose to ignore that. But it does seem from the officer's advice, it's highly likely to some degree that we may have to revisit that name as the Commission's recommendations pass through the political system and filter down to local councils. And they do state specifically local authorities should review the appropriateness and consider what steps may be taken to change names and so on and so on. So they're talking directly to us there. Finally, I do see it's not too difficult to find a solution here that is consistent with the developer's aim to choose a name that acknowledges the history, previous land use or local vegetation, and to comply with recommendations of the Royal Commission of Inquiry, and to be sensitive to the history of the site and the trauma that's carried by people in our community today. So I do agree with the officer's recommendation. I think there is further conversation to be had with the developer, and I would hope that the developer could be more sincere in providing alternative names. But I won't support the recommendation that's before us now to use the name Chapel Lane.
Thank you for that. I put it, those in favour of recommendation to approve the name Chapel Lane? Aye. Aye. Those against?
No.
Carried 2-1. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next road naming report for Whale Rise, and that's on page 23. I kindly ask the Bernadette Power and Mandy Bishop to the table. So we've got here a subdivision not too far away, and Councillor Ben referred to it just earlier in regards to Marsden Valley. And we've got this in regards to Solitaire Investments Limited progressing into subdivision, and the application for the name Stallion Lane for one of the alternate names of the road was approved or declined that for a road within the subdivision, which comes off Woolshed Drive, Marsden Valley, if I've got that correct.
Yes.
And there is an attachment there, so for reasonably familiar with Marsden Valley, but over the years there's been some incredible developments up there. I'm familiar with Quail Rise. I'm not familiar with this specific road, but I'll hand it over to the officer.
Assuming that you've all read the report, I support the naming the name Stallion Lane.
And just to be completely clear, that's as in the name that the subdivider submitted requesting.
Yep, they are the three names the subdivider proposed, and the preferred option is Stallion Lane.
Very good. I'll hand over to my colleagues here. I'm very comfortable with that, unless it's something that I overlook, which is great, which is why we've got three of us here in case I overlook something. But any questions?
I have a question, and it's sort of not quite in line with this, but one of the reasons for doing this is that we don't get names that are the same or similar. And that must be pretty high on the list, because, you know, the reason for having a street name is so we can identify where we live and other people can find us. And in this subdivision, we've got 2 Vintners Way, 2 dead-end roads with exactly the same name, which I struggle to get my head around that. But and so they're new. I mean, these are new subdivisions, and I don't understand how we got to that point. But in some ways, it's nothing to do with this. But I make the point that that's got to be pretty high on the list, having 2 roads with exactly the same name in a new subdivision. So I don't have any problem with this name. It's the developer has kept a farming theme there. I don't know whether there were stallions there. There was a very good farm, I would like to point out. This farm won Farm of the Year in New Zealand. It was an outstanding farm. And all the facilities that I've shown in the Woolshed, and I've used the Killing House, all the different things that were on this farm. It was an outstanding farm, and it's great that this developer is trying to keep some of that alive. It was New Zealand's Farm of the Year. And then, I mean, if you ask anyone about New Zealand, what are we? We're farmers. And it was the Farm of the Year in New Zealand. So that is outstanding. So I have no problem with this. No.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. But yeah, I haven't come across Stallion Lane anywhere in the region. I'm sure there's possibly something similar in the other regions, but I haven't come across. I live on Westbrook, which comes off Brook Street, which is near Brook Lane. the Brook Valley, yeah, we're similar. And I constantly get Westbrook or Brook Drive or Brook Lane or Brook Street, which are all very similar, but Stanley Lane of Bullshed Drive of Quail Rise. No, very good. Thank you for your report and doing the yards going over to see it if it's.
Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll move what recommendation we have in front of us. I'd like to, I'll say, what do you guys like to move it? Sorry.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Benj.
Happy to second.
Seconded by Councillor Stallard. I'll put it, those in favour. Aye.
Aye.
Those against. Carried. Thank you. And the next one, which I believe is the last one, is the traffic and parking bylaws. And I've got Alec and another Alec and Gina. Sorry, Lyndon. Helen, I'm not sure. That's all right. I'm always very hard on Alex, so I better keep it up, shall I? Very good. So I've got pages 32 and bear with me, visual here. So we've got around High, Jackson. Yep, I'm just bringing up maps. That's right. No, very good. No, these are always very interesting because you see as the city develops and as things get more congested, less congested, well-designed roads, sometimes need some tweaking, etc. And as we change the way we transport ourselves around, staff do a very good job of, and the feedback from communities where we need to, yellow lines, parking spots, or no more parking spots. But saying that, I'll let you present. Take it as read, but please present. There's a few quite different areas of Nelson.
So, thank you, Chair. I'll pass over to Gina, who's written the report to give you the highlights.
Morena, Chairperson and Councillors. The report before you outlines proposed changes to the schedules of the traffic and parking bylaw, and the report is being taken as read. These proposed changes are a result of project works and minor safety improvements to ensure the safe and efficient use of Nelson's roading networks and corridors. Officers have received additional feedback on the following items. Atkinson Street proposed no stopping, received a total of 4 responses, 1 in support, 1 not in support, and 2 on unrelated matters. Hampden Street proposed no stopping, received 3 responses in total, all in support of the proposed changes. That includes both Nelson College, Hampden Street School and SBL. The proposed changes for Marybank received 8 responses in total, 7 in support of the changes and 1 on an unrelated matter. Additional yellow lines and interventions were also requested. We now welcome questions.
Thank you. And over to my colleagues, any questions with regards to our report?
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for the report. Just a question or two around Atkinson Street. Firstly, the shared pathway, I guess it's in the name, it is cycling and walking, both those modalities. Is that the case?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you. And I'm just interested about the one submission and opposition to that change, and if we have any information on parking use, like how is it light or medium parking use of that area that's proposed to be no stopping, and what activity or where are those people going when they park there?
Through the chair, the not in support was around kind of mostly around the parking, but more around the actual marina part of it. You'll notice that the proposed yellow lines are around the promenade, around that first dog leg of Atkinson Street. The use is quite it's peaks, it's peaked when there might be an event on at Trafalgar Park or the fishing is really good. So it does kind of come in peaks and troughs, and there will be more allocated parking beyond those yellow lines between the end of the no stopping and the marina and the cafe and those amenities up there.
Any questions from yourself?
No, I've read all this. It all makes sense to me. I liked pulling over on Atkinson Street because I love boats. I won't be able to anymore, but fair enough. No, it all makes sense to me. I have no problem.
I think, yeah, for the, like both all of us here pretty familiar with Nelson, it's really interesting to see how these things develop. But looking at Adelaide Drive there, the Tresillian, you've got the no stopping, and I don't expect people to be parking there, but you've got, originally there was, this is page 44, originally you got the hashed lines there, in regards to sort of merging, or giving us sort of a lane there. The yellow is really just enforcing what the previous lines did, or do we have people stopping on those spaces?
Correct. There have been instances in the past where cars are parking there on that corner.
Okay. And as recovered in the Ackerston Street one there, there's areas there where it does get a little bit difficult for people parking. And as you're saying in the report, that's really for enabling the cycleway, walkway, the widening, and that carries on towards the existing parking area. Very good. So thank you. That all seems too straightforward. Very good. Cheers.
Hey, just to follow up, I wonder if you could just briefly explain, I think you mentioned that the Ackerston one is part of the resource consent for the shared pathway. If that's the case, the decision around no stopping, if that's made now, that's not really part of the resource consent, or will people get a chance during the resource consent process to, or will it be notified or not? I guess just some details around that.
And through the chair, I need to confirm, but I understand the resource consent for the path has been done, and that required that the issue of the no parking was raised through that process, and this is formalising the outcome of that process.
Great, thank you. And just in terms of the existing parking, when people do park there, are there like parking bays painted on the roadside where to guide people to park, or they're just parking sort of freely there but legally? And when they do park, is there currently plenty of space for people to go past the parked cars and stay in their lane, or does it create a bit of congestion?
Through the chair, just to confirm, are you talking about the new proposed layout for Ackerston Street there?
No, the existing layout like today or last year, are there painted parking bays, or it's just unpainted and you park where you like?
Through the chair, there are some. So up towards Ruby's, the cafe, there are some parking bays that are formally lined on both sides of the road, and then past that, it's informal but legal, and that is wide enough now. But once the promenade is open and it's 5 metres, there is not room to continue 2 lanes of traffic and a lane of parking.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just last one on page 42, Tipa High Street, outside the intermediate there. You've got existing sandy bid colour codes there, existing mobility park, existing car park, and proposed bus stop. Further along, is there already, I'm not denying that we need one there, but there's already a bus stop. This is an additional bus stop, is it? Was it a change of? It wasn't for 3 buses.
Correct. It's an additional time restricted bus stop that will only be available to buses during those peak pick up and drop off times. At the moment, there is about 35 metres of available bus stop, and there are 3 buses in there, and there isn't enough room to fit them all.
Okay, and when it says proposed time, was that saying it's a car park outside a particular time and a bus stop?
Correct. It'll be available for car parking when it's not a bus stop.
Oh, very good. Okay, no, that's a win-win. So no, very good. Hey, thank you for that. I think it was a very clear and a very good report. And just for the sake of people watching this, because people have different views, understandably, on how the road is used, how is it consulted? I've got it right. You knock on a door down the street, drop a flyer, say from Tipai Street, asking for responses, because you didn't get many responses from some and more in areas of.
Directly affected residents, say if the yellow lines are outside their house or the neighbouring house, they will get a letter in their letterbox.
Yep.
And then if it is something like Ackerston Street that is publicly used,
yep.
It goes into our Nelson, and it refers people to a Shape Nelson page.
No, very good. Hey, thank you for that. And of interest, sometimes I see we've got a new giveaway space here. I'm sure no one will. Some of them look like a parking spot, and I've seen the other person park in a giveaway because this lines are just like a parking spot. But I'm sure no one will confuse that for one. But hey, thank you for that. Does anyone want to move? I'll take it as a whole lot. If there's nothing there, I don't think we need to go into detail on this request. I think it's moved by Councillor Penge, seconded by Councillor Sell. I'll put it. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. And as I drag through our digital version, I believe that's our last and only part of the report. So hey, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your staff being there. And thank you, my colleagues, for doing this one. It's a very interesting topic.
Thank you.
I'll close the meeting. Moved by Councillor Bitch, seconded by Councillor Stallard.